Really? Is that how you want to start 2022? All right, how about I try it one more time, okay? Good morning. There we go. I'm happy to see all of you here this morning. Thanks for coming. And we launch a new series today, asking a big question. Where are you going? Anybody travel over the holidays? You have a road trip you had to do or whatever. We did. We did a little road trip, 13 hours in one day, there and back, all in one day. And it was a lot of fun. You know, when you do those, you have certain things that happen. Have you ever gone on a road trip, started, and you're like, why did we ever do this? Because it just turned out to not be the greatest situation or circumstance. And then you actually end up trying to, make it better or whatever. Maybe you go and you like to stop many times on your trip, seeing the biggest ball of twine and the barbecue sauce that melts your lips off and, all these things. And, maybe that's what you like to do in your trips. But have you ever noticed that when you're wanting to get somewhere, then that's when you end up sitting in traffic or you end up with a detour or whatever? That's what journeys just end up being from time to time. Sometimes they're flawless. You just go and you have a great time. You come back, no issues, no problems. But sometimes you find that the car breaks down or you just run out of gas. Well, all of that relates to what we're talking about. Matter of fact, you probably could tell right from the beginning that we're talking about being on a journey today. And the fact that our lives have a lot to do with being on a journey. And quite honestly, this series, as we go through this, we're going to actually look at the journey that I believe is the most important one that you take, and that's your faith journey. Matter of fact, no matter where you are in your relationship with God right now, no matter who you think He is or how long you've known Him, how long you've followed Him, any of that, you're on a journey. Matter of fact, one of the things that can be a real problem is changing this around. I believe that faith is a journey. It's not a destination. You know what I mean, thinking that you finally get to a certain point and that's what it is. You don't go any further. And what ends up happening with that is you find yourself burned out. You find yourself completely like, this isn't what I had in mind. This is not what I thought faith was going to be for me. And it can be, rather disappointing. Matter of fact, when we actually make faith a destination, we set ourselves up for something. And that's this: disappointment, disillusionment, and a word that's being thrown around a lot these days, deconstruction. In other words, it gets to a point to where you thought launching on this faith journey was going to turn out a certain way for you. That you actually were going to have things feel a certain way. That you were going to have things go your way now, or expectations you had for it. And maybe even getting involved in the human side of the faith journey, and that's church, relating to people within this group of people here or wherever it may have been in your past, and you're just like, I don't know. And you end up with disappointment because the expectation was one thing and it turned out different. Or you found yourself being detoured or flat out running out of gas in the middle of it all. And maybe it's disillusionment because you thought that God was going to do certain things for you and it just didn't turn out the way you thought. Well, quite honestly, you thought it was going to be much better, that your life would be all together finally and you wouldn't have to worry about things. And then you ended up having to worry about things. You ended up having to deal with circumstances and situations you didn't think you'd have to do once you were on this faith journey with God. And actually, you get to a point to where you start to deconstruct your faith. You just start tearing it down. It seems like it's falling apart around you because the things haven't lined up. And quite honestly, these last 2 years have been crazy. Have they not been crazy? And have you seen the memes? The meme about this coming year, 2022, that we're now already into. And it's the meme of the people around the corner and they see the door that says 2022 on it. And the guys are holding a big stick around the corner, hiding behind it to turn the knob to get the door to open for the new year to enter. I don't know if you feel that way or not, but it could be because where you are in your faith journey explains how you're approaching this and how you're feeling right now and what you think of God and who He is in your life. And so what I really hope to do over these next few weeks as we go through the month of January, I want to take you on a journey. And I'll just tell you right today, we're doing an overview of everything we're going to do the rest of the month. So hopefully you're going to see something there and you're going to say, man, I want to see more of that. Well, come next week and the week after and keep coming, because as we start to talk about each one of these things, it'll hopefully just unpack some things that you're going through in your life. And I want to tell you, this is for everybody who's on the faith journey, which means everybody in this room. Whether you acknowledge God at all in your life, or whether or not you have known Him and followed Him for years. So today we kind of launch into this, and I wanted to use a scripture that I thought would really be of value to show us what this really at the core means. And we're going to go to what is a very familiar one, maybe for some of you who've been in the church a lot of your life. It's the passage about the vine and the branches. And sometimes it's misunderstood, and sometimes it's, so much allegory that people, they try to interpret it, and they put so much explanation in it. I think it's very practical for what we're going to talk about and where we are, and what we hope will be an experience for all of us. I can tell you, for me, going into this new year and what the things that I've experienced the last couple of years and looking back on it and everything, I want to make sure that I'm in a place where I can thrive as a follower of Jesus. And that's really what we want for everyone, is to find yourself in a place of thriving. So, I don't know what comes to your mind when you think of thriving, but I think of growth and excitement and fresh and new and all those things. So that's really what we want. So if you're finding yourself hungry or thirsty spiritually, or you're finding yourself on a detour or just out of gas, hopefully this is going to help you take some steps in the right direction. So I want to take you to John wrote this about and captured Jesus' words, and he wrote this story that Jesus was teaching. He basically gave us this teaching about it. And I want to pull out some things here at the beginning that we all know and understand, or that we can know and understand. And so we start with this. Jesus is teaching the disciples, but he's also teaching a large group of Jewish people. He's wanting them to hear this and to understand it. And to Jews, this was a big deal. To people who had grown up under the teaching of Israel, they would have thought this is powerful teaching. But Jesus, of course, being Jesus, changes it so that it is more applicable to them in a way that he was bringing fresh and new to them. So, in verse 1 of chapter 15 of John's Gospel, this is what he says: I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. So this is the first fact that you need to know and hear about. When we think of vines and grapes and vineyards and things, we don't think of Ohio, especially Fairborn, Ohio, as being a place, just full of vineyards, right? I don't know how many of you have ever tried to grow grapes, but I tried it one time. It's harder than it looks. You don't just plant it in the ground and hope that the next year you're, pulling out Welch's. It just doesn't happen. All right? You have to do work to it. And in this climate that we live in, which, yesterday was spring and today is, the tundra, frozen tundra. And so it just doesn't work. For us, we don't relate to this. But the people that Jesus was speaking to, they understood it quite well. Matter of fact, they related to it a lot. Jesus would have been teaching this probably really close to the temple, where that they would have gone through all of their rituals and worship practices and things. And so in the entrances to the temple, there were vines that were made out of gold that were placed there. And people would bring gold to be fashioned into leaves and clusters of grapes, and they would have them molded to those things to be a part of this vine of Israel. Well, Jesus said, I want you to think of it differently now. I want you to think about this vine and this idea completely different than something iconic in the temple. I want you to think of it as a relationship. And he starts out by saying that he's the true vine. He is the vine. And that that God the Father is the gardener, or the husbandman, the one that comes in and cares for the vine and the branches. So that's something to know. Jesus is making the statement, and he's changing their icon all around. I am the true vine. So if there's going to be any growth going on, know that at the source of it, the vine itself, Jesus is the one. But then the verses a little further on say this. It says, and he made this as a statement for them to know, to remain in me as I also remain in you. Some of your Bibles might say the word abide, and, whether you go, your mind immediately goes back to the phrase, the dude abides, or whatever. That's not at all what we're talking about. The idea is that remaining is the idea we want to convey as thriving. What it means to truly have a relationship with Him. Remain in Jesus. How do you do that? How does that go on? What's it look like to have a relationship with Him and to remain in Him so that it's consistent and it's going on all the time? Then another fact that he talks about. I am the vine. He's emphasizing the fact He's the vine. But then he says, you are the branches, meaning the people being spoken of. And anyone who would be His follower would be a branch. So Jesus is the what? Say it with me. Jesus, He's the vine, and we are what? Branches. All right? So in any vine, that's growing, you're going to have the branches. Where does the fruit come out of? Does it come right off the vine? No, it comes right off the branch. And so that's an important part of this to remember and to think about and to consider as we're talking about. And Jesus giving us this illustration of the fact that He's the vine, and who's the branches? We are. All right? Any of His followers are the branches. So as we hear it discussed and we talk about it and we put this story, and how Jesus unfolds it, you'll see how it all plays together. But then He wanted to make sure we knew something. And this is very, very important. He then takes this idea, this picture of a vine, and then turns it into a human relationship and what we would see as relationships and friendships. And this is what He says. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. Jesus knew all about this. He was only just a few days away from actually getting to a point to where He would lay His life down, die on the cross for everyone's sin, and be raised from the dead to offer eternal life. So with all of that said, He knew what He was saying here. He's changing the whole, I'm the vine, you're the branches, and greater love has no one than this, that you lay your life down for your friends. Look what He says about this idea of friends. Let's go back one more. Let's go back and finish that up. You are my friends if you do what I command. Don't let this be a statement that sounds like it's conditional. To be God's friend, you got to do something, or you've got to follow through a command. It actually is trying to emphasize the fact that Jesus was not referring to commands like the 10 Commandments. He was referring to the commands that He had already shared. Ideas of actually loving Him, loving God, and loving other people. If you do that, then you show who you love. You show where your affections are. You show where you're connected. So if you're a branch and you're a follower of Jesus, you show that you're a part of the vine, Jesus Himself. But then the verses go on. Let's go to there. I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. The idea is that when we consider someone we work for, they're not going to let us in on everything, right? So back in those days, when they thought of masters and servants, there were people who literally, this is part of the culture. Not that the Bible was condoning slavery or any of this, but he was showing the idea of in the culture, if someone's a master, they're not going to let all the secrets out to everybody who serves them. And so it's just the same as an employer doesn't give you. And if you are an employer, you probably don't tell your employees every little detail or secret of the business. That's just the business relationship. Jesus is saying, us together? That's not what it's like. Instead, I have called you friends, for everything that I learned from my Father, I have made known to you. So in other words, He's letting us in on the secrets. You can have a relationship with Him that is close. So let's go back all the way through it. He's the true vine. We're the branches. If we remain and stay connected to Him, then we're friends with Him personally. This is not like being a servant of God, which the Jews would have thought that's what you got to do. You got to do a lot of things. Jesus is saying, no, you're my friend. You're my friends. And so he changed the relationship up. This is what's critical. Jesus wants to be in a close friendship with you and wants you to thrive. He wants you connected to him. He wants you to know what that's like. He wants you to understand those things. So for us, we've been contemplating this for a long time. And I told you at the beginning, it's going to be a lot of information, all right? So just get ready, all right? And you might say, man, Greg, that was just like drinking from a fire hose. I apologized for that part. But this is overview today. So capture what you can, and then I promise we will come back and we're going to look at some of this and how it really applies to our lives and how it can really make a difference. So when we start to look at this, we see that there are, along the journey, different parts of this journey that we all experience when it comes to faith. And the first one that everybody experiences is the explore part of your journey, where you're exploring it. And so if you're exploring, that's where you're just discovering who God is. You're beginning to know who he is. You may have something that has triggered that in your life where you really want to do it. Everyone in this room, I'm sure, is either at that level or has at least experienced it in your life at some point where you were exploring who God was. And you were wanting to discover. It could have been because of a sense of awe, something you perceived that God did and you wanted to know more about him. Or perhaps it was because of a need that happened in your life and maybe someone reached out to you or showed you compassion, but you were like, I gotta get this wrapped up. I know if there's a God, I want to know who he is. And so that need has brought that about in your life. Or maybe you have a desire for greater meaning to life. You know, if anything would have changed, I mean, circumstances in your life over the last couple of years or just period in your past may have put you in a situation where it's like, I just don't know. I don't know what the meaning of life is for me. And it feels like I get disappointed or I get disillusioned or I start to even deconstruct the things that I believe because of these circumstances. And I don't know what to do with it. And you may say, I've got to explore whether or not there's really a God. Is there someone there? Maybe you're curious. Maybe it's brought about a curiosity, curious and very open to answers. It's like, I've got to know what's really going on here. And so it's caused you to explore. And you know, one of the things we do around here is starting point. And that's where, you know, people could come together for a conversation about their faith. And it just gives them that opportunity to ask the hard questions. And can I just tell you, if you're at this place, it's okay to be here. It's actually great to be here because you're beginning to be open to it. It's a good place to be. Acknowledge it. It's all right. And can I say this to parents and maybe even grandparents or guardians of children in here? You know, you got to remember that your children are going to be asking these kind of questions. They're going to be going through this. They're going to be exploring faith. And you've got to do everything you can to be where you should be so that you can help them along on that journey. Because you want to be able to make sure they get the appropriate answers, the right things. But I take you back to the words that Jesus said, why this is so important. You want to make sure that you're connected to the true vine. So that exploring of faith is that you're really wanting to find out truly who Jesus really is. Not just a generic belief in God that he exists out there, but what it is to have a personal relationship with Jesus. And that's what he wants to have with every one of us. He wants us to be a part of the true vine and connected to him. Now, you go from exploring, maybe you've come to a point of faith in your life where you're really getting to that point where it's like, I do believe there's a God and I do believe what Jesus did. And I'm really at that point where I'm ready to place my faith and trust in him. Well, it may be that then you get to a point on your journey you're building. You're beginning to build what you know and have learned about God, and you're wanting to know who he is more. And so you're doing everything you can. You're hungry for information, you know? I'm just hungry and thirsty for more. I want to know who he is and what he's about. And sometimes you really start to read scripture and you start to research and look into what it really means to be a follower of Jesus. And you just can't get enough. It's like, wow, I didn't know all this was in the Bible. I didn't know all of this was in Scripture. How would I have known that? You know, and so you begin to see it unfold. You look for a place to belong and a security in your faith. That's a lot of times happens when we're at that point. And many times people who have acknowledged Jesus as their Savior, their Lord, their leader in their life, have come to a point. This is where really you say, you know what? I want everybody to know. And this is where many people take the step of being baptized. They actually do that so everybody will know that they have faith in Christ. And it begins to build your faith and it begins to grow it. And then you find many times in this place answers from a leader or from a belief system. And I will tell you this can be a danger zone. Building can be a danger zone, and I'll tell you why. Because you can get into a rhythm of coming to listen to one leader like me or someone that you might listen to on a teaching or a blog on the internet or something like that, and you listen to them, and they're the only ones that are giving you the answers, and you're not finding and learning to find answers yourself, and so you're depending on a leader to give you everything. If you're coming to Fair Creek and the only time you're getting information, and if you're at that building stage at the beginning, that's totally appropriate. But if that's all you're relying on is just what I say on a Sunday morning, it's not going to be enough for you. And you're going to need to be able to find a connection that goes beyond just one leader or a belief system. And quite honestly, in our culture today, isn't all belief systems being deconstructed? Aren't they all being torn down? Every one of them. It doesn't matter which one it is. It's not just those of faith in Jesus. It's many belief systems are being torn down and deconstructed. And so if that's true, then we have to have a belief system that we have a faith in and a trust in. And so sometimes we can get disillusioned, disappointed because we just stay here. All we want to do is suck in information and not allow transformation to take place. So it can be tough. Let me show you what John had to say when John wrote this down that Jesus said, "You are already clean because of the word I have spoken to you. Remain in me as I also remain in you." In other words, once you get to a certain point, there shouldn't be anything that disconnects you. There shouldn't be anything that takes away from that. You have to build your faith. So it's a good step to be in, but you can't just stay there. You can't stay in that part of the journey. You ever been on a trip with your family and it seems like you were going to leave at like a certain time and then 3 hours later you're still in Walmart getting stuff for the trip? Ever had that happen? Or one thing leads to another, happens, right? And so we get ourselves delayed in a certain spot and we never move forward. That's not what we're supposed to be doing because we're already at this point. We want to remain in Him, a consistency. But then once we're at a building, and you might say, I don't know where I'm at. Neither one of those explain where I'm at right now. Well, let me take you to another one. There's a place where we get to where we're owning our faith. We really own it, and it's a part of us. It's where we become, a person that's doing for God. We want to sign up and get involved. Action. Action speaks louder than words. And if I get involved, I can really begin to serve and show. Unfortunately, a lot of times that doing can be driven by guilt or the need for relationships with other people, and it's not for the right reasons. And so you can actually get to a point, and I love this. John has said this a couple times, not John in the Bible, but John Harney, who talked before we started. John said it's kind of like moving from, we get it confused, and instead of being human beings, we become human doings. And it's really true. We get to the point to where our Christianity is all about what we're doing. And we forget what it is to actually be in relationship with Jesus. We forget what the motivation for why we serve in the first place is. And so this can really be a danger zone for us. We get to a point to where we burn out, and especially if we're doing it for ourselves. And you start to take on responsibility, and you find a uniqueness in your community. You find a place where you can serve with a group of people that have like musicians, or people who love to work with kids, or people who are really into the tech, and they're back there running live stream right now. Okay, and they find their place, their uniqueness. And they take on responsibility. And it mostly feels energizing and fulfilling to do these things. The problem is if we just stay there, if the only thing we do is to sign up to serve, we go to the app and say, this is how I'm going to grow this year. I'm going to serve on a team. Well, let me just tell you, if you're doing it for yourself, or you feel guilty, or you're doing it to impress somebody here, or whatever, I'd rather you not. Just don't bother. It will actually do more harm to your relationship with Jesus in the long run than it will help you. Because you end up doing something for the wrong reason or wrong motivation. And that's not at all what you want. Let me show you what Jesus had to say about that. He says, I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. If we're in close relationship, then there'll be fruit come from our lives that He will produce. But apart from me, you can do what? Say the word. Yeah. See, that's not what we want. We don't want us to at a point to where we're doing it for ourselves. If we do this to where we're doing it disconnected from God. So if you're serving right now, you feel like, yeah, that's me. I'm in the own stage. I wanted to get in and serve, and I wanted to do it. That's how I was doing. And you just feel, you're starting to feel burnout, or like, does anybody even know I'm even doing this? Is it even worth it? Or are you showing up because if you don't show up, that won't get done at church? Or you know what? If you're doing it for those kind of reasons, you're doing it for yourself rather than you are, or maybe to impress somebody else. You know? You don't need anybody's approval but God's. And the whole point is that it can become an issue, becomes a negative. And then imagine hitting a rough spot, a place where it was difficult in your life. It can derail you, it can disillusion you, can disappoint you. It can even make you to the point to deconstruct your faith. We don't want that to happen. Here's what we hope would happen. This is the goal. This is the thing I'm kind of looking forward to and hoping that God will do in my life. And I'm going to do what I can in my own life, but I want to encourage you. And this is the journey we are on for this next month, is to get us to a point of what it is to thrive. Thriving means that we're reflecting God in our life. We actually have this renewed sense of God's acceptance. We're here, we're doing this for God. We're not doing it for anybody else or for any other reason. You know, if you feel like you've got to show up to make the coffee because nobody else will, or you have to show up to park cars, or you have to take care of the babies in the nursery because nobody else, or they'll be screaming in the service, that kind of thing. If you feel like you're doing it for those reasons, or you're just at a point where all you do is come and you just listen, you do every Bible study that comes down the path, but there's nothing that happens that changes in your life because of it. All of those things, you don't want to be stuck. You want to be thriving. You want to be reflecting God. You want this renewed sense that God is there accepting you for who you are, how He's made you, and what He wants to do in your life. And there's great wisdom that comes from the struggles you go through. Rather than a struggle, disillusioning you or disappointing you or derailing you completely from your faith, it actually gives you a chance to see God in a different light. It gives you this calm, steady faith regardless of the circumstances. And quite honestly, it allows you then to be more compassionate living for others. It gives you a chance to actually pour into other people now. You know that you don't have to do this for any other thing. If you're doing it for you, then you're going to miss what it does to help you thrive. And so, honestly, a lot of churches, a lot of Christians, and quite honestly, I've been there many times myself. I have missed this completely. I don't want anything else more than this in my life. But I know that I mess this up sometimes because I want to stay in that build and own. And can I tell you something? It's kind of a thought that I wouldn't necessarily share with everybody, but since you're family, and if you're new today, well, you're family, okay? Here's what I tell you. It's hard to have being spiritual as a job, okay? I'm a pastor. I'm supposed to be good. I'm supposed to be the guy who's always on top of things. I never have problems. I am never tempted to sin, okay? That's what you pay to make sure pastors do, right? No. Let me just tell you something. I can get stuck in that build and own stage just like anybody else can. And I can be content doing it for myself or for the approval or what anybody else says about me. I can get stuck there. But I want to tell you what. This is the only way to live as a follower of Jesus. This is the only way to live. And you can't get yourself stuck in those things where it's just not real, because what will happen is you'll become disillusioned, disappointed, and your faith's going to get deconstructed. You have a greater sense of calling. And that's where you just know, God, I'm doing this for you. You've put me in this unique situation. You saved me out of the junk that my life was before I knew you. And you have turned me into something that I could never have done myself. You're doing that for me. That's what thriving is about. Let me show you in what Jesus had to say. I'm just going to read right through this. And it almost sounds, it comes out so clear. Now remain in my love if you keep my command. Now remain in my love. If you keep my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and remain in his love. I have told you this so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be, what's the word? Complete. Not missing anything. That's what we want. And it doesn't mean we become perfect people, because then that would be turning faith into a destination. And it's not a destination. Thriving is an everyday journey that we go through. The verses go on. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you so that you might go and bear fruit that will last. You ever invested in something and it doesn't last? Huh? You ever tried to do something, pour yourself into something, and it just doesn't last? You know, you pour all this time and effort, maybe even resources into something, and then, okay, was that dramatic enough? You get the idea? It's just like, why? It's a waste. Let me tell you something. He says, I've appointed you to bear fruit. I want you to thrive. That's what he says. I want my friends to thrive. I want you to be connected to me, the true vine. I want the branches to have all kinds of fruit hanging off of it, off of those branches. I want that for you. I want you to thrive. I don't want you to go through life not understanding or being completely disappointed in what should be a life fulfillment. And he just goes on, he says, and so that whatever you ask in my name, the Father will give you. Doesn't mean that you can just go and ask for, I want to win the lottery. It actually means the closer we are to him, the more he shows us the amazing things he can do in our lives. Do you want to be close to him? He'll be close to you, and he'll help you thrive. I will tell you, though, there's a reality that happens, and this one's the hard one to talk about, and I want to make sure that I leave it, because we're going to come back to these, all right? So don't worry if you're like, I didn't get all that. I have no idea. What was that last thing? If you're a note taker, sorry. Okay? It's all in you version, though. If you go to the church app, it's all there. You can see it right there. But this next part of the journey is the one that we all stay away from. Matter of fact, we don't like to admit that it happens, because if we do, we admit weakness, and potentially we admit what we may think could be perceived as weakness in God if this happens. And so we ignore it, we push it aside, but everybody goes through a wilderness. Everybody, and you may have multiple times where this happens to you. And it could be that it's difficult, but let me just tell you the difference of a wilderness in a person's life. In the things that we talked about, when you're exploring your faith and when you're building your faith and maybe owning, if you don't get to a point of really thriving in your relationship with God, a wilderness is what can derail you quicker than anything. It can make you lose hope in God. It can make you lose hope in all the things that you've believed. And it's so hard, because when you come to church and you want to be in a church service with the church people, and you got to fit in and you got to make sure that everybody thinks everything's okay. So we never talk wilderness, because if we do, we look weak. We want everybody to think we've got it all together. Okay? See, this can be a real problem if we don't get ourselves prepared for this. Let me just tell you, a wilderness, though, can be a time to rediscover God. If we're thriving, it can be a time where God shows himself in a way we wouldn't have thought. These are times that are pivotal circumstances, like losing someone we love, or a relationship breaks up, or we find out something that is just devastating and it's hard to go through. It may be something about our health. It may be something about our finances. It could be any of those things. Things that we had expectations for. The way our family would look, the way our children would behave or live, or what they would end up doing, the way my career would turn out, the way even Christianity was supposed to turn out for me. All of this, but it gives us an opportunity. It's those life or faith crisis, those loss of certainties, and confronting the past wounds and false self, putting on that mask to make everybody think everything is okay when it's really not. You know how I know that everybody in this room and everybody watching understands this? It's because we've all been there. We've all been there. But the greatest thing is it releases God from the boxes we put Him in. Don't we like to control things, even the way God does things in our life and the way He plans our journey? And we want the journey to go a certain way, and we come up on an event in our life that's a detour or a situation that just zaps us and takes all the gas out of our tank, and we can't keep going. It doesn't feel like we can. But yet God is right there, and He's the one who's able to take us to the next level and the next thing and the next thing. You ever been there to where it's just that? Maybe some of you feel like that's where I'm at right now. And I wish God would just do this. We need to be able to acknowledge this, but be ready to say, you know what? If I could thrive in my relationship with Him, if I could connect to the true vine and feel like then He can produce fruit during this hard time. Something I never would have expected or never wanted. And it can even feel like an apparent loss of faith. The point it's like, I just don't know. A wilderness can be something that's just causes such devastation in your life. It's like, I just quit believing. I don't even know if God exists anymore. And this can be for the strongest of believers at times. So important that we don't disregard this. Let me show you what happens and what Jesus taught when it comes to that, when it comes to the true vine. He says, He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, He prunes so that it will be even more fruitful. This is the part we don't like, but many times these things is what God uses to bring about real growth. If you've tried to grow grapes, you have to prune the branches a bit. You have to cut some off. You have to cut the dead leaves off of them, and you have to do that. And you don't keep them. You don't cut a branch and then try to glue it back into the vine. It doesn't work that way. That's not how we're talking. We're talking things in our lives that God uses then to gain our attention. But the verses even go on. And it says this, if you do not remain in me, you are like a branch that is thrown away and withers, such branches, I should say, are picked up, thrown into the fire and burned. Don't let this throw you off. This doesn't mean that He wants to get rid of you. He says this is what it's like. Our life will feel useless if we're not connected to the vine. It's not that He wants to go around and cut you off. Oh, say, look, you messed up, you're done. Oh, you're in a wilderness, clap. That's not what He's doing. He's actually wanting to prune and get you to a point to see Him in a different light. And the connection to Him is what's going to bring about fruit in the situation. And then He wraps it up with this. If you remain in me and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish and it will be done for you. This is to my Father's glory that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples. It doesn't mean you get whatever you ask for. It means that when you're that close and God does that kind of thing in your life, then God's going to show Himself in ways that you never would have thought. So I take you back and ask you the question, where are you going and where are you on this journey? Are you exploring? That's a great place to be. Are you building? Are you owning it? That's good. It's okay to own. You don't want to stay there, though. You want to get to a point of thriving. And if you are right now wandering in a wilderness, don't give up hope, because he wants you to thrive. He said we were his friends to the point that he gave up his life for us to make that point. So Jesus wants to travel with us. He wants to travel with us on this journey. And he uses our circumstances, our experiences, our relationships, and who you are as a person, who we are, who he's made us to be. And he wants to produce something amazing in us. To do this, I want to suggest 3 things today. And this is not the answer. Matter of fact, a lot of this maybe has just stirred some tension in your life. Maybe it's just said, I don't know that. I don't know where I'm at. I don't know what's going. That's okay. Matter of fact, it's better that you acknowledge the fact that I don't know where I am on this journey. I want to know. It's better that you do that. And it's better that you don't just settle for disappointment and disillusionment and deconstruction of your faith. Don't settle for that. This is what you do. You got to acknowledge where you are. Think about where you are right now. Think about maybe even where your kids are and where you want your kids to be. And if you want them to be there, then you got to think about where you are and how you're going to help them and lead them through that. And then you got to open your heart. You got to open your heart and your mind. Going to go forward, not to sit still, not to settle, but I'm going to do this. And then you can't do this alone. Don't try to get there by yourself, alone. Maybe it's time to think about a step toward being in a community group or in Starting Point, or maybe even in a one-on-one relationship with someone who can mentor you and disciple you and bring you along in your faith. All of those things important to us. Because when I ask you the question, where are you going? Every one of us are on that journey. And the whole goal, the whole idea of where we go together, this church, imagine what he can do in your life if you're thriving. That's our goal. I want to thrive, and I hope you do too. And Jesus wants to do that in you and for you this year.